Hey there, my friends. We're going to do a look at the Robert M. Place Buddha Tarot, the reissue by Red Feather. And I thought it would also be interesting to compare it to the original out-of-print Llewellyn edition. So that's what we're going to do. I ordered this mostly to do this, to sort of show this compared to this, because this is it has been a really sort of sought after deck in the collector community. It's very hard to get, and when you get it, it can be very expensive. I was very lucky. The deck itself was gifted to me, but after looking at the deck, I realized that you really can't do anything with it without the book. And so I had to hunt the book, which was probably even more expensive than the deck was. So this is the Llewellyn version, and I don't have the box, like I said. It came to me from a friend in this sort of ironic Merry Christmas tin, which I've kept it in. And then the book I found used online. So that's the Llewellyn version, and so recently Red Feather has come out with a reissue of it. A few things to say about this deck, before I get into the sort of walkthrough and comparison, is that it's not, I would say, a deck you would necessarily reach for to do readings with. Place calls it a mandala of cards, and I think that is maybe a more apt way to think about it. It's kind of an exploration of Siddhartha's life and of Buddhism as a what's the word I'm looking for? Not a construct, but a worldview, a system of thinking or believing or in engaging with the world. And it's interesting. I was thinking about this recently when I saw that this was being reissued, and I said, it's, as for someone like me who has, my therapist for many, many, many years had been a Buddhist monk at one time, and taught me a lot of sort of coping mechanisms sort of through the lens of Buddhism, and it was through him that I discovered Thich Nhat Hanh's writings and Pema Chodron, and found in those some really helpful and life-changing sort of ways of experiencing life. But the idea, for me as a tarot reader, I really am very much a tarot reader, and I don't use decks necessarily for kind of spiritual exploration. I am a fortune teller in many ways, and so that is, to me, it's like the idea of fortune telling in Buddhism. They don't kind of go together, because there's this sense of trying to stay present, and as Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, present moment, wonderful moment, right? Not to think so much into the future, etc. So it's just an interesting little dichotomy that I wanted to throw out there. But this is a whole, it's a system, I guess. That sounds sort of dry and technological for what this is, but it is its own thing. And one of the things about Robert M. Place, and one of the reasons why I've always liked his work, even though I don't necessarily jive with all of it, is that he is never speaking from a place of not having done his homework. He researches, he goes in and he deep dives into, if he's going to make a deck of something, then that he's done a huge amount to understand. He's a very, very intelligent person with a very, very deep wealth of knowledge, and you can see it in this. You can certainly see it in his massive tome, the Alchemical book, and you can see it in the Vampire Tarot, which honestly I wish Red Feather would reissue too, because that's my favorite of his decks. But when I got that deck, I realized too, I got that deck as a gift. No, I didn't. I got that deck on eBay, but it came without the book, and someone gifted me the book. You can't really sort of fully understand that deck without reading the book either. So, this is all by way of saying that I'm always very interested in what Robert M. Place is going to do, because it's going to be well-researched, deeply fascinating, but very, very dense with information. And so this is not, and I think the same thing about the Vampire Tarot. Less so the alchemical decks that he has, because I do think those sort of feel more like tarot, and you can pick them up and work with them. The Vampire Tarot, you really sort of need to study the book and understand what he's doing. So that's sort of my preamble, is to sort of say, if you are interested in this, just know that you're going to be doing some studying to understand its function. and how it works, and what the sort of, for lack of a better word, what the system is. Because it's not, I would say this is more an exploration of Siddhartha's life and Buddhism than it is a tarot deck, in a way. It contains the structure of tarot, and certainly I think you can use it as a tarot deck. And I don't know, we'll see if the naming convention is the same, but it was a, the majors have different names, although they do have subtitles that match. So let's break in. Now, it's so funny with Red Feather, it's so hit or miss with their packaging. This looks very luxurious. Very, you know, it's a really sturdy box. We've had issues with their boxes being sort of flimsy or not containing the cards really well, so we'll see how this goes. So it does contain the book. Oh, it's full color. So I don't know necessarily that it contains everything that was in the original book, obviously, because I'm just opening this right now. But it is a little smaller, and less heavy. So I wonder if it's been edited somewhat. That's not necessarily a bad thing, though, because it can be a little dense. And, you know, just, he really knows history, and so that's a thing that I think is really fascinating, too. So I probably will do a read-through of at least the beginning of this, because it's super interesting just to kind of revisit and sort of see where he came from. He also does, I think, if I remember correctly, I did read the book when I got the deck, the old one. He makes a nice connection between the two, and I can't quite remember how it's done. It's never my favorite thing when decks are split up this way, but given some of the issues that we've had with Red Feather decks in the past, I guess, you know, it's better than having them sliding around. The cardstock is interesting. It's not, thank God, they're glossy stock from days of yore. It does look a bit sort of ragged around the edges from its packaging, I will say. These little chippies. You know, that's fine, I guess. I think it's always interesting to me that, you know, they just seem to have such a weird relationship to production quality, Red Feather. I kind of don't get it, and we've been sort of talking about it for years, but what I will say is that I love this black border. I love black borders on decks. I would take a black border over a borderless deck any day. Let's move the books aside here. These are, I can tell you, already larger than the original Llewellyn deck, which this was the original Little White Book. And the back has the same sort of icon on it, but these are bordered, and these aren't. So you can see here right out of the gate, much larger, much thicker. I'm going to be curious to see how this shuffles. So as I said, the names are different, but he does sort of give you the traditional name at the end. So the descent from Tusita, heaven, is the Fool. So you can already start to get a sense that, like, if you don't know the journey of Siddhartha, if you don't know the journey of the Buddha, if you don't know Buddhism, this is not going to mean much to you. And so the book is a good primer, certainly. I do think that this is the kind of thing that is sort of useful for people who are deeply, invested in it. But I'm a fan of Plisa's artwork, too, and his, like I said earlier, his scholarship. So I also love the way the title runs along the side here. I think that that's very stylish. Not necessarily the easiest to read, but I think it's very cool. And so I don't know whether the art has changed at all, but it does not look like it. He does, he has over the years sort of refined his artwork, but there's really nothing artistically about this deck that I don't like. So the majors really sort of tell the journey from Siddhartha to enlightenment. And that's sort of what the journey is. And again, I think Robert M. Place does a really nice job. This is Siddhartha. Again, sort of not forcing a theme into something that doesn't fit. Like, I think he always finds a way to sort of make the theme fit the tarot and vice versa. Even when something like this, they seem to have no real connection. And I just really love his artwork. I always have. Of his decks, this is probably the most colorful, which is nice. At least of the ones that I have. And I just have always, I really love his style. It reminds me of sort of modern versions of old woodcuts. And it's just very cool. So, these are the majors. And again, there are, like, justice is karma. So there are these sort of conventions that make sense. But you do need to know the story to really fully sort of understand why you're seeing what you're seeing. I don't think, you could necessarily not read the guidebook and pick this up and read it like a Waitsmith deck. It's really not that at all. But again, I just love his style, and this has always been this is the corpse death. These are these visions that Siddhartha sees while meditating. This is the temperance card, but it's the sort of moment where he is delivered food. So it's interesting. I mean, you can see if you know the journey, you definitely see those moments if you know the story. So, there's the moon. And if I remember correctly, there's an extra, there is an additional major card. I would say, the description of the cards begins like well into, like, you can sort of see, like, this is sort of where the major arcana. So all of this is kind of about the deck, about Buddhism, about the journey, about the connections, etc. So there's a lot in here, and I like that. I mean, it's a really nicely done book. I think it's well designed, and in each sort of one he gives you a quote or a description, and then sort of where in the story of, or the evolution of the Buddha's life it comes in, that's being depicted, sort of commentary on the event, how it can be used in divination, etc. I'm just looking for the so the final card sort of represents, in his 80th year, Buddha's body grew weak, and he knew that he was reaching the end of human existence. So this sort of depicts that beginning to transition into out of human existence. So that's the final major arcana card. So then the suits are different than in a traditional Waitsmith deck. So I'll read just a little here from the book. Each of the minor suits in the Buddha Tarot is assigned to one of the 4 Buddhas of the cardinal directions called jhinas. The royal court cards contain the Buddha as king, his Sakti as his queen, his guardian animal as the knight, and his Dakini as the page. In Buddhist iconography, each of the jhinas is assigned a magical implement as his symbol. He is also assigned a color, a cardinal direction, and an element. The 4 implements make natural substitution for the traditional suit symbols in the tarot. They have been equated to the traditional tarot symbols through the elemental associations that they both share. Vajras for swords, jewels for coins, lotuses for staffs, and double vajras for cups. Surprisingly, the Buddhist symbols are a good match for the traditional suit symbols. The borders of each suit display the color that is associated with each jhina and make the suits easily identifiable. And so you can see here, I put them in the wrong order. Let's see. Where are we? We're looking at lotuses first. Ace of lotuses. Now, what's interesting is that the book just said that the borders of the cards match the color of the element, but they don't. I can see just looking through, as I was just looking through here, the original deck did. So lotuses were red. Here they don't have a border indicating. So the book, so I'm guessing that maybe this wasn't actually all that closely edited or revised for this edition. So he does a thing that I only sort of Robert M. Place does, that he does these sort of Pip-esque cards with just a little whisper of a scene. Again, these scenes are not going to make much sense without the book. You know what I mean? So you need to sort of understand what it is you're looking at. Where are we? We're at the Two of Lotuses, for example. Two women work together as one, pouring milk into a large cauldron. This card represents love and harmony between two people, teamwork, and the common interest. In Tibet, milk, particularly the milk of the Dri, the female yak, is considered an ambrosia. Milk is poured into large cauldrons like the one on this card and boiled with equal parts water to enhance its healing power, etc. So again, I don't think, if you read with pip decks, you can read with this without sort of knowing what you're looking at. If you are invested in the image, you're really going to need to study the book to see what it is you're looking at and why. As always, he draws a very clear line and a very sensible line between each as he does, but it's not, I wouldn't say something that you would pick up intuitively unless you were familiar with the deck already, or you were familiar with the, with this sort of intensity and level of Buddhism scholarship that place seems to be. It's interesting to me. It's a little one of those things that feels sort of very on brand for Schiffer, which is that, like, the book says, oh, we're going to have colored borders, and the deck doesn't. It's just, again, it's a frustration that I have with their output. You know what I mean? It's like, is no one editing these books? Is no one looking at it and saying, oh, gee, in the book we say there's going to be color and there isn't. That's not Robert M. Place's fault necessarily, and it may have been an editorial decision to not use the colored borders in printing it for Red Feather, but striking that from the book would have been wise. Or just not wise necessarily, but thoughtful. So here we get into what would be the courts, and again, as I said, they represent a Dakini is the page, an animal is the knight, a Sakti is the queen, and then a Buddha is the king. And in the book he goes into sort of what that means in terms of like directions and elements, and sort of the Buddha of the east, the Buddha of the west, etc., north, south. And so, to go through it would be very, very take a long time, but it's all in the book. Sorry, I'm just trying to see what I'm looking at. So now we're at Double Vajra's, which is the suit. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to that suit. And that's the other thing, is it's not because, again, I'm not that well immersed in this. I have to keep reminding myself and going to the book to remember what each suit is. So double Vajras are cups. It's not necessarily as easy or intuitive as he suggests in the book. Maybe it is for him because he's studied it, you know what I mean? Or maybe it will be for you if you've studied it. So, I mean, that's one of the things about being very brilliant, is that what seems easy to you is not necessarily easy to everyone else. But again, this is a deck to me that holds more sort of fan interest as a fan of his art and his work than it does as necessarily a practical tool for me in my own reading. And one of the main reasons that I had pre-ordered this, and actually I had forgotten I pre-ordered this, to be honest with you. So when it showed up, I was like, oh, I forgot about this. Was really to show you, because I know it's a deck that people are in search of a lot. finding used copies of it, out of print copies of it, is expensive, and now you can get it. So I just wanted to show you what that means these days. You know, what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, etc. How it compares to the original. Artistically, so far, there's no change other than the borders, and obviously this new sort of setup. So the colored borders on the minors, and then this. I love this black border, and I love the side titles. Although again, like I said, it doesn't necessarily make it as easy to read. But it's kind of a deck I'm probably not going to read that much with. You know what I mean? So the Vajras, that was double Vajras, and now these are Vajras. I googled what a Vajra was when I got the deck originally, and it was a weapon that was sort of used in a conflict with the thunder god, as I remember correctly, and the blades or the tines are sort of closed to make this sort of this shape. And it becomes sort of a symbol of something else. But you know, again, these are fairly pippish, with just the, like I said, the whisper or the hint of a divinatory image. I personally really like that about this deck and the vampire deck. Nobody really does that way, but it's gonna not delight everybody. Because again, you either really have to know what it is you're looking at by studying the book, or you just sort of have to use a system of reading pips that works for you. So really all the same. I like the larger images to see the cards. I don't know that it will be as easy to shuffle. Again, it's not a deck that I've really, that OG out of print edition has not really shuffled that much. I've had it for many years, and I don't think I've used it more than once or twice, because it really does require study and, you know, an investment in really understanding what you're looking at. And if you like doing that, then this is definitely for you. So now we're in the suit of Jewels, which, if I remember correctly, is coins? Jewels for coins, yep. Oops. It's getting warm in my office right now. I have the window open. You can probably hear the cars out there, but it's getting hot in here. So again, I haven't seen really any changes in the art at all. So if you are definitely interested in seeing this deck as it was, you're getting a pretty close, at least artistic example of it, minus those colored borders, which again, you know, isn't really the end of the world necessarily. You can see what the suit is. It's in the card title. Just it's always interesting to me that there's just these little things, these little misses, these little sort of carelessnesses that we get when we're dealing with a red feather situation. So those are the cards. Alright, let me shuffle this bad boy and see how that works out. They are large. I don't have large hands. I don't think I can riffle it top to bottom, maybe side to side. No, it's not going to bend that way, so it really doesn't bend that way. So really, for me, the only way to do it will be to overhand it. It's nice in terms of the overhand. Like it's got nice resistance. It is a little large for my taste, but you know, it's to appreciate the imagery, certainly. It's nice. I don't know what to think about the cardstock. I imagine that if you were to riffle shuffle this, it would chip the borders. It's not bad cardstock necessarily. It's actually surprisingly bendy. I'm interested why it won't can I corner shuffle it? Yeah, you can corner shuffle it. It's very thick. That might be why. So, you know, stutter, I like never know what I'm saying. This is the deck. So if you're curious about it, here's what it looks like, and it is the same art from the original. The book must be nearly identical because it references things that aren't in this edition, but it is essential. So just know that, like, if you're curious and you're like, I want to get this deck and I want to be able to use it, you're going to have to study this, and at a minimum, just read through it. The bright side is that he's a great writer, and he knows his history, and he's really, he can take sort of scholarly topics that might seem dry and make them fun. So I enjoy reading his work. So there's that benefit. And I would say it's a, I mean, if you want to read about Buddhism, I would honestly go with a real practitioner to understand it. You know what I mean? Like, Thich Nhat Hanh is sort of, for me, the way to understand it, because it becomes less about theory and more about practice and living in the world. But it is really interesting. So it's nice. It's not. I mean, it's in Red Feather fashion. There's some weirdnesses with the deck cardstock, with the editing of the book, but it's a good set. It's nicely packaged. I didn't find the cards, with other decks, all slid around the box. I can't speak for everyone who gets it, whether they'll have that experience, but it's, seems promising anyway. So yeah, that's the deck. I love his artwork. I love what he makes, and I love exposing myself to things that he makes and learning from it. So it's not a deck that I ever read with, and probably will not now, but it is fun to sort of read through his text and explore the deck through the book. And if you read tarot in a different way, if you do sort of create mandalas, if you do use tarot for exploration, spiritual exploration, etc., then this might be a really great tool to do that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Take care. Be good. We'll talk soon.